Greetings and welcome to the Centricity 912 recorded demonstration. My name is Michael Horonkowitz, and today I'll be going over key functionality updates in this version of Centricity. As you can see, we're logged into Centricity EMR and on our desktop module. First thing you'll notice is that the user interface has changed slightly as far as its appearance. We are now using a lighter color blue, and you'll also notice that the folder tabs found underneath the module buttons are now more rectangular. You will also notice that there are two new tabs available, RX Renewals and EPCS Transmission Failures. Let's take a look at EPCS Transmission Failures. EPCS is an acronym that stands for Electronic Prescribing of Controlled Substances. EPCS will be required in the state of Massachusetts starting on January 1st, 2020. This functionality will not be enabled immediately following go live, but over the following 3 months, the PHO and EMR team will be working with each prescriber to get them enrolled in this feature. What does this tab do? Well, let's say your practice sends an electronic prescription of a controlled substance, and it happens to fail getting to the pharmacy due to a network interruption or an application issue. You will be able to review those failures in this tab here, and either resend electronically and verify that it was received, or in the event of an emergency, such as a prolonged network downtime, you'd be able to print that prescription from here as well. Let's move over to the RX Renewals tab. So what is the RX Renewals tab? This is your one-stop shop for electronic refill requests that come from the pharmacy, and also for pending refill documents that are queued up for a provider to review and sign. Now, right now, I'm the individual that's logged into Centricity, so as we can see in the upper left, it is set to me as the user. I am not a prescriber, so I do not have any refill documents available here to see. Now, this would be common if I were administrative staff or a medical assistant, but often those staff members are responsible for managing these workflows for providers. So how would we change that? We do have this magnifying glass here, and it really works in the same way as the binocular icon that we're all used to seeing. Now from here, I could change this to an individual prescriber. I could change this to a bucket user if your practice happens to support that workflow, or I could create a group with multiple providers in it. Why would I do something like this? Well, let's say I'm an administrative staff member or medical assistant that supports multiple doctors. I could add all 3 doctors to a group, and that way I'd be able to review those documents for all said providers. Let's go ahead and show you how we could create one of those groups. We'll notice this More button down below here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new group. My new group is going to be called Testing Providers, but obviously you could call that whatever makes sense to you and your practice. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of users to it. So I'm going to search for my TestMD and add that item to Testing Providers. Excellent. I'm also going to go ahead and add myself so we can see what it looks like with multiple users. Okay, so now I'm going to highlight Testing Providers, select OK, and now I have updated from my name to Testing Providers. Down below, I can see all members. I can also toggle in between individual members. Now in this case, TestMD is the only one that actually has any of these refill documents queued up for review. So as we can see here, we have the requested date and the patient's name, as well as their date of birth for identification purposes. Over here, we can see whether there's new medications or change medications or pending medications. And then over here, we have 2 icons where we can take action. This icon here will take us to the chart, and this icon here will take us to the chart while also starting one of those renewal documents. Over here on the Documents tab, there is one new update. Now this is available both when we're in the desktop document view as well as when we're in a patient's chart document view. Now in this particular case, I have a transition of care summary that has come in for this patient. You'll notice that we have a new icon here, this little square that says TOC. Now everybody is used to this in-window view, but if I click on this TOC, then I'm going to get a larger web view TOC viewer. Now the nice thing is that this TOC viewer opens up into a separate page. Therefore, if I'm using a two-screen workflow, I could be reviewing this transition of care document while also reviewing the patient's active chart. Now this is a web view and all of these are hyperlinked, so I can simply click on anything within the table of contents and it will automatically take me to that specific area within the CCDA. I'm going to close this window now and move on to the registration module. All right, so we are now in the registration module for this test patient. We do have some new fields available in the registration module, which I'd like to review with you here. They can be viewed by clicking on the change button. Now, as we can see, we have a field for gender identity, sexual orientation, a second field for race, and a second field for ethnicity. Now, I do want to note it is not required that these fields are filled out. However, it is a nice to have with our patient population. So in the event that your patient identifies as a separate gender, you can insert this here and it will be readily available in the patient's registration so that you and your staff know how to identify that patient. Now, these fields may or may not be able to be imported from your practice management system, and we will have to look at each of those on a case-by-case basis dependent upon the vendor. It would require that these fields are available in your practice management system, and then that your practice management system is able to send them to Centricity, where we could receive them and import them into EMR. Now, the EMR team will be happy to work with your practice management vendor on a case-by-case basis to identify if this is possible. Now, we also have an additional checkbox here, Patient Data Access Authorized. You might be asking, what is this all about? Well, part of CMS's new regulations is about putting the power in the patient's hand to access their health information. This Patient Data Access Authorized is a permission that will be set by default anytime a patient has an email address in their registration. Let's go ahead and show you how that works. So I put in an email address. I have selected OK. And now if we review back, we can see that that checkbox is checked. Now what Centricity has made available is something that's called an API. Now this API should allow a patient to use an application of their choice on their mobile phone or mobile device to download their health information. Now at this time, the marketplace has not created an app that works with our version of Centricity, but we will see if that happens in the future. By having this checkbox checked though, we are meeting CMS's requirements by having a system that supports this functionality. From here, we're going to move over to the patient's chart. All right. So as you can see in the patient's chart, most things look as we are used to. However, as we stated before, the colors are slightly different, as well as the folder tabs being a little more square. The biggest change to your functional workflow within the chart or within an update happens with the prescriptions form. Now the prescriptions form is available through the phone note and refill type updates. It could also be part of your office visit update depending upon your specialty. Let's go ahead and start a refill to show you how this works. So this is the new prescription form. This form will also support electronic prescribing of controlled substances and multi-factor authentication when that becomes enabled at the beginning of 2020. Now this form uses HTML coding, which means that it can be moved and resized which, as you know, is not a common feature with our Centricity forms. Hopefully, the vendor that creates and supports Centricity will continue to incorporate more HTML content, since it definitely makes things more user-friendly for the end user. Now in the top here, we can see that we have some patient identifying information, so the patient's name, their sex, their age, and their date of birth. Over here, we have the patient's current pharmacy. We also have any pharmacies that are listed within the patient's registration. And sometimes they can have multiple pharmacies that are listed within their contacts in registration. So let's go ahead and set this to the patient's pharmacy. Once I have a pharmacy selected, we'll notice that the active medications over here on the right side, the Renew button becomes enabled. I'm going to go ahead and select Renew for this medication here. And we have now started the process to prescribe this medication for this patient. Now, let's say you have a patient that has some medications that they have to receive through their mail order pharmacy and some that they want to receive from their local pharmacy. This new form allows us to do both within the same update. So I'm going to change from this pharmacy, which supports electronic, over to this mail order pharmacy here and select Renew. So now we can see we have two medications that are set to be prescribed going to two different pharmacies. This pharmacy supports electronic prescribing, and that's always indicated by an asterisk here at the end of the pharmacy name. And we can see here by default that this is set to an electronic method of transmission. This pharmacy here is a mail order pharmacy. And again, we can see with this icon that it's defaulted to a print then give to patient. Of course, we could also do print and then fax, and I'll show you how we'll make that happen in here. Now, since I started this update and I am not a prescriber, we want to make sure that I'm not set as the authorizing provider for this. Now, what Centricity has done in this version is created this toggle bulk edit mode. So if I click on this little icon next to the update prescriptions for renewal, it brings me over here. So I'm going to go ahead and set TestMD as my authorizing provider. I'm going to select all the prescriptions, and I'm going to go ahead and apply. We can see now that the authorizing provider has been updated for all of those medications. Now, we will close bulk edit options and go back to the individual prescription themselves. Now, oftentimes you need to make edits to the individual prescription for refill, and that can be done on an individual basis here by hitting this little pencil that says Edit Prescription. So when I pop into here, I can update the quantity, I can update the dose form, I can update the number of refills, as well as the instructions and the comments. I could also change the prescribing method or the authorizing provider from this area, as well as change the pharmacy again as well. So Centricity has gone to lengths to make sure that the pharmacy that will be receiving this prescription is prominent in all areas of the form. And the same would go for this pharmacy here. And I'll go ahead and say we are going to print and fax to the pharmacy. Okay. Now, in addition, over here, you'll notice that we have an icon for clinical decision support. We have another icon here for patient education. Those are also reviewable over here. These will launch Truven's IBM Micromedics, where we can review information that is geared towards the prescriber or information that is geared towards the patient. And last but not least within this form, up at the top here, you'll notice that we have the ability to launch the medication module where we could update or add new medications, and this functionality all remains the same. We can also view inactive medications, view problems associated with this patient, view allergies that are associated with the patient, appointments, interactions or contraindications, as well as looking at ERX eligibility benefits, and this would be based upon the patient's insurance and then the communication that the e-prescribing module has based on that insurance. Down here towards the bottom of the form, we have two different options now. We have print option SignRx and we have SignRx now. Now, why would I use the print option SignRx feature? Well, let's say that you are writing a controlled substance that's going to be printed and you send that to a separate printer or a separate tray. You now have the ability to set that printer from here without going back up into your options and select printers. We can also simply say SignRx now, and it's going to go to the default printer or be sent electronically. What I can also do is I can take this document, close out of the form, and now place this on hold for the provider. And now that document is waiting for the provider's signature. And if I go back over into my desktop and my RX renewals, we can see it right here as well. Okay. So that concludes the demonstration of key functionality changes within Centricity 9.12. If you have any questions about workflows, functionality, or regulations that are driving these upgrades, please feel free to reach out to the EMR team. You can always be reached via phone at 978-287-3447 option 2. The EMR team can also be reached via flag by flagging help desk. And the EMR team can also be reached via email at helpdesk@emersonhosp.org. Thank you again for your time today, and we look forward to supporting you in this new version of Centricity.